Is China cheaper and better to live than the rest of the world?
They don't have to spend 20% of their paycheck on groceries. What do you mean in other countries everyone can own homes because they're not paying $2,000 a month in rent, or that their mortgages aren't like their entire paycheck? What do you mean that people in China work one job and they don't even work 40 hours and they can easily afford their life?
Well, this is a statement that's constantly being made by people with travel vlogs, or just this idea that China is much better than the rest of the world, dealing with inflations, dealing with just lots of different issues, reckless amounts of consumption at a very high price point, whereas in China, everything is cheaper. So is that true? We're going to try to find out today through a few different calculations, as well as investigations that I've been going through online from personal accounts, from information that we're able to find, to help you guys understand if that is the truth. Now, to get started, we have to lay some ground rules. There's many factors that we have to ignore, many factors we will keep consistent, and for example, one of them is the Engels law, or the Engels coefficient. It's supposed to be used in order to multiply a country's income so that it actually adjusts to the spending power. But we're going to ignore that clearly, obviously, because of mathematical issues. We might lose some people. So we're just going to do very simple calculations today, and make sure to stay till the end, because there's lots of different factors that we have to go through for things to make sense. But first, we're going to start things very simple with just a straight conversion, meaning that for $1, the same is for 1 yuan. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. The reason we're going to do that is because it's the simplest, but also it does highlight an issue which will persist throughout the entire video. So that means for $1,000, we're going to treat it as the same as 1,000 yuan, which means we're going to examine what is the experience of somebody who is making $1,000 versus somebody who's making 1,000 yuan. Is it the same? Is it different? And to do that, we're going to first look at the hourly minimum wage. So here's a video of a Chinese live streamer named Hu Chengfeng. He made a video going to a supermarket, seeing what he can buy with just 15 yuan in his hand.
一些日常吃的，比如说肉水果、蔬菜、主食这些。一个鸡腿3块4毛2 ，136克，246克砂糖蜜橘2块6毛9。8块白菜1碗，是苦瓜8一贵。这个大红萝卜是1块3毛9一斤。咱们就挑一个小的，1块1毛3一的。买一袋挂面，这还剩4块4毛6一的。我们拿一盒，它还剩1块8一袋。这就是1小时工资15元的购买力。一个萝卜，7个蜜橘，一袋豆奶，136克鸡腿，一盒纯牛奶，一袋挂面，购买力很强，爆赞。
And after seeing that, I decided to also go into a neighborhood mart to see what I can buy with $15 in hand.
Okay, so we're in the state of New Jersey right now, and the minimum wage is $15.40 per hour. We're gonna see at a neighborhood mart what we can get with just an hour of work.
So I was in New Jersey. I happened to stumble upon this store. So I went in and I bought stuff. So here's what I was able to get. Now, as you can see, at the time of this filming, I searched up that the minimum wage for the state of New Jersey is $15.49 per hour. And we managed to keep it at $15.44. Here's what I got.
So right now it's about $15.44, and I've been able to get a box of fettuccine pasta. We have about 8 drumsticks, 1 pack of shin ramen, 2 white onions, and a quart of milk. And that's $15 here in New Jersey.
Now, this isn't much to say, but it's clearly more meat and bigger portions than what he was able to get with 15 yuan. And so if we were just looking at this, we might be able to get 2 to 3 meals out of this this purchase, whereas the other one, it seems like you can maybe get 1 meal out of it. Here's the catch though. China looks better when we consider the conversion of the actual rate. So if we just take 15 US dollars and we turn that into the yuan, well, based on the current rates of conversion, that's going to be about 115 yuan, which obviously we know it doesn't take a lot of brain power to know that 115 yuan is a much more amount of money in their local currency, so which means that they can buy way more stuff than what we can buy with 15 yuan. So whenever you account for the conversion of currency, and this is why all those videos make it seem like China is so much cheaper, it's for one reason, because the currency difference, right? If you're somebody who's from the United States, you take $2,500 to China, you're gonna live like a king. And that's just how the world works. You have the American dollar dominance and everything else in between, right? People go to Japan because Japan's currency, the yen, was in such a bad state that it's really good for you as an American tourist to go there and spend your money, the American dollars. So when you account for the currency conversion rate, well, people in China are also living like kings if we were to do the same number of dollars, right? So here's what we did for the second one, which is we compared a monthly salary based on that $15 minimum wage, right? So if we account for 40 hours per week, in a month, that's about 2,400 US dollars. So think about this. Again, we'll go back to the straight conversion again, which is 1-to-1. If you have 2,400 US dollars and you have 2,400 yuan, actually, we did this research. You can find an apartment in Shanghai, which is not far from the city center, for about 1,300 yuan, okay? Which leaves you about 1,100 yuan to spend on whatever you need to spend it on. We also found on Zillow in New York City, but this is in Queens, a $1,200 studio apartment. So that leaves you about the same amount of money that you can use for any of the utilities, phone bills, transit, etc. And by the way, we're assuming rentals here because mortgage, that's a whole nother beast, and we'll be using way bigger numbers. So just to make things simple for people to understand, we're just sticking with rentals. Again, without accounting for the actual currency rate conversion, you would see that $2,400 gets you a similar lifestyle in both Shanghai or in New York City. So not a lot of difference here. Really good if we convert that $2,400 into yuan based on the current conversion rate of the currency. And that's gonna become 17,000 yuan per month. So 17,000 yuan per month is what not many engineers would be making in China in a major city like Shanghai. Or even if you are an engineer, you're somebody who has done maybe like a decade of work or something like that. Of course, if you had $2,400 and you went to China, yes, you would be ordering takeouts, you would be dining in restaurants, you would be going to places because, well, that's just how it is because you're now technically dealing with 17,000 yuan, right? I went on this website, essentially it's like the Quora, but in China. Basically, I looked into this thread where they asked how much are you spending per month in a city like Shanghai. This woman here says she makes just over 10,000 yuan. She spends about half of that, so about 5,000 on the monthly expenses with everything combined. Another person says they spend about 7,000. This person says 5,000. So if you're somebody who is like an engineer or somebody who's making about anywhere from 10,000 to 15 or 17,000 yuan a month, yeah, you could actually save up 10,000 yuan a month, which again, if you're living in the local area, that sounds like a lot of money that you can save up. So it sounds like a dream. Why isn't everyone moving to China then? But in fact, we're seeing the opposite. Why are Chinese people moving to Japan, moving to the US and trying to escape China if they can make so much money in China as a middle class member? Well, the truth is there's simply not many people that's making that much. Those people, they're a very minority percentage of the population in China. China's former Premier Li Keqiang said 600 million Chinese people made 1,000 or less in a month. And their yearly income averages to be about 30,000 yuan, which means they're literally making less than half of what the minimum wage would get you in the United States if we're still sticking with that 1-to-1 conversion rate. But in reality, they're making way less if we account for the actual currency conversion. And of course, there's also the objective side of things, right? The language, the culture. Americans aren't moving to China because of their censorship, lack of freedoms, and foreign businesses, investments are leaving China. So there's no incentives for Americans to go to China right now. And this is, again, one of those suspicions why you're seeing an increasing number of videos trying to propagandize how great China is, but the reality of China is so different than what's being told in those videos. Now, you might be asking, why is it cheaper in some aspects? Well, we can talk about this. For example, one, it's cheaper to dine out, it's cheaper to get takeouts, it's very cheap to eat in China. It's cheap to get a massage, it's cheap to get a haircut. It's probably pretty cheap if you were to just buy, groceries from a local farmer's market or on the street from vendors. These are very cheap. The reason is the labor cost is very cheap in China. And there's so many competition in terms of the sheer number of people that, of course, they're going to drive the price down. That's a given, right? You have so many options. But aside from those things, other stuff are just equally as expensive, if not more, because of markups. It's things like phones, computers, laptops, tablets, or TVs, things that are imported, cars. So when you're actually considering things that's outside of just filling your stomachs and putting a roof over your head, if you're really looking towards buying things that's out of the basic necessities, well, things start to get very, very expensive in China. And so if your goal is to just live and to breathe, to be able to just get by every single day, well then yeah, China is pretty cheap in that respect. But anytime you need to spend a little bit of money to get something, then the costs start to really show up. So we're going to break down that in case studies. This video shows a woman who is touring her studio apartment that's only about 2,000 yuan a month. And if you convert that to the US dollars, that's less than 300 US dollars, which is pretty insane. But again, it's not how things are going to work, because in real life, the currencies that they're dealing with is their local currency. The currency that we're working with is our local currency, right? So we can't do a conversion rate based on what's the actual market rate right now. So the better perspective on this is, again, that simple 1-to-1 ratio. So imagine her studio apartment doesn't have really a big kitchen. It doesn't have a lot of space. For $2,000 in New York City, you can find a luxury apartment sometimes. Or if you step a little bit outside of Manhattan, maybe you'll even find a bigger luxury apartment for that price. So if you actually consider the quality of life that you can get with the $2,000 versus 2,000 yuan, that's again pretty different. So while it's cheap to get a haircut, it's cheap to order takeout, it's cheap to get something in China, in return, what you're seeing in terms of the raw spending power, well, China, of course, is nowhere near that of the United States. And this woman in this video here, she lives in Beijing now because her son needs medical attention because of his brain cancer. Her son's monthly medical expense is more than tens of thousands of yuan, and her son's surgery will cost hundreds of thousands of yuan.
看一次病大约得花多少钱？
现在每个月得1万多，
你要做手术呢？
做手术得好几十万。
我的妈！
They're paying out of pocket because there's really not a lot of insurance coverage for many people in China unless they work for a state, the government, or they have a really good company. So these people all have to pay out of pocket. And that's another issue, right? According to the Financial Times, they only spend about 6% of the GDP in China on what's known as the individual consumption, which are things like healthcare, things like basic security, which, obviously, if you have a socialist economy, you're supposed to spend more on this. But China, despite calling itself a socialist country, they spend not a lot. So there's no basic welfare system, things like Medicare, Medicaid. A lot of the population in China have to spend out of pocket if they ever get sick. Okay, then we have to talk about what happens to those people that are the engineers who are making 20,000 yuan a month. Well, those people, they're probably working 996. They're not working 40-hour weekdays, right? They're not doing the 9 to 5 and then coming home. They're doing the 9 to 9 and 6 days a week. That's 12 hours of work. And so for those people, yeah, they're making a lot of money, but if you compare to what they do versus the engineers here, again, there is that huge discrepancy between what they need to get. So the quality of life, again, suffers. But to get to that point of being that engineer, maybe you had to go through extensive amount of schooling. You may need a master's or even a doctorate. Maybe you already have had 10 years of work experience. Maybe you graduated from a number 1 or 2 university in China. And by then, that's a big if you can outcompete 6, 7, 8, 9 other people with a similar resume on their file. So the tremendous amount of hyper competition is also another factor too, right? Which, it does mean that if you get to that level, of course you're going to live like a king because, you deserve it. So then the last portion is talking about who actually gets to make that much money. Because let me tell you, besides the people who are living in like Shanghai and Beijing, most of the other places in China, they're not making like close to 20,000 yuan a month. So this driver here, he does delivery driver. He's worked 30 days this month, 15 hours a day. His final take-home amount is a little over 6,000 yuan, or about $860 to $870. Okay, that's working 30 days, 15 hours a day. To get that same amount of money in the US, you just need to do part-time. You need to work 57 hours at McDonald's to get that same amount. $860. And it gets even more telling. This 67-year-old is a construction worker. He gets paid 150 yuan per day, which is about only $16. And he can't afford to get an actual rental place. He can't afford to get meat in his diet. He only eats congee and some bread. And that's the life he lives. Whereas if you want to make that much money in China, well, you might have to work like in this video. Literal slave labor hours. And that's precisely what happens in this video. This man is complaining that the Dongguan factories in Guangdong, which, by the way, this is the area where the world's factories are located, right? So this is where all the Chinese manufacturing is done. The base salary is about 2,000 yuan a month. And so for people to be able to make something like 4,000 to 5,000 yuan a month, they have to work overtime, they have to work the 12-hour shifts, they have to do extra days on the weekend in order to get that. And guess what? You dish out 1,000 to 3,000 on your expenses. You can save maybe like 1,000 yuan at the end of the month, but if you know emergency calls or anything like that, that's gone. So a lot of people, they're living monthly to monthly, paycheck to paycheck with zero savings. Again, to put that into perspectives, 5,000 yuan is about 800 US dollars. Again, you just have to work at McDonald's or Starbucks or somewhere for minimum wage for once or twice a week to get that amount. So while China appears very cheap on paper, when we dive into the elements of things, we find that there's an uneven amount of quality of life, uneven amount of work conditions, uneven amount of lack of happiness involved in order for them to get there. And the big takeaway, I think, is that, or the moral of the story, is that if you're somebody who just wants to get your stomach fed, wants to have a roof over your head, wants to say that, yes, I can eat out every single day, 3 meals a day, and have enough income to support that, yeah, China is very cheap in those respects. But anything beyond that, well, that's where things start to fail. All right, thanks for watching this episode of China Insider. Let me know in the comments about the way I did the calculations. If you have something else that you want to share, make sure to comment those below. And also subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching China Insider. We'll see you next time.